how important is the reverence, and how do we know what the right dosage or journey is, path for us?
Yeah, the reverence is critical. It's absolutely essential to have respect for these powerful tools. I think we've become accustomed to medications just kind of being handed out all the time and very easily, and often without a lot of preparation for what to expect. We see this with opiate pain medication, right? And things that are very, very powerful and addictive and have a lot of side effects. And a lot of folks are just not getting the preparation they need for those medications. And that's also important, because if you misuse those, it's easy to become addicted and ruin your life.
How is that? That is so crazy that they just hand these things out like to a kid in high school after a surgery, and then they're addicted. It's mind blowing, but that's another podcast.
Yeah. I mean, but it's a part of the same story, which is that, if it comes down to a really critical decision point around intention, right? Which is, where am I putting my human energy in any moment? And it has to do with, when I put something into my body or I engage in X activity, whether it's work or exercise or whatever it is, why am I doing it, right? Am I doing it to escape from discomfort, or am I doing it to learn more about myself and engage with my discomfort, right? Mm-hmm. And it's literally that fundamental decision process that I learned through my studies of working with a lot of folks struggling with addiction is critical to what we get out of the experience and how we learn from the experience. When we go into it with the goal of escape from discomfort, what we ultimately all learn is that there is no escape. You always come back to yourself at the end. Mm-hmm. So you can't really escape. And then what happens? What do? You take more, right?
And
then
discomfort
more often.
grows, and then it gets more painful.
Yeah, because it's not being dealt with.
Yeah.
You're literally trying to avoid dealing with it by distracting yourself with something that feels good. And this happens with sex, and it happens with work. Right? We've heard of workaholics, right?
Scrolling,
alcohol, lots of drugs, right? Cell phones, video games, gambling. It happens with all of these things. So it's not unique to drugs. But what's interesting is that psychedelic medicines in general have a very low addiction profile. So it's relatively challenging there are people who get addicted to them, but it's relatively rare compared to things like opiates or cocaine or alcohol or nicotine. But they have this ability to help you steer and guide this intention. And so when we prepare people, we really, really prepare people for this idea of, you're here to face what is your discomfort and to learn to build tolerance to it. And when you learn to build tolerance to it, guess what? You get way more tolerant to discomfort, which means that things that used to make you uncomfortable don't actually bother you anymore, which is a great human skill.
Yeah.
It's what we used to teach kids when they were young, before cell phones, right? We teach them how to self-soothe on their own, and they had to figure it out. Maybe they would go read a book, or maybe they'd go like run around in circles in their room, or they do something. Maybe they do deep breathing if they figure it out on their own, or play with Legos. But the point is, they figure out some way to soothe themselves when they're feeling uncomfortable. What do we do now? What do a lot of people do now? They say, okay, here, take my phone, right? Or take this iPad. And so what do kids learn? They're learning, oh, I'm uncomfortable, I'm anxious, I'm restless, I don't feel good. I need to do this. Yeah. Distract. Then what happens when they feel uncomfortable and they don't have that tool? They seek anything to distract or numb themselves to that discomfort. And so it's really training people and training our brains when we do that. Technology that you mentioned earlier, it's very helpful to us in a lot of ways, also has the downside of messing with our impulse control and our self-soothing strategies, because it makes it too easy to distract and numb yourself. And so it's really important to use technology intentionally, just like we use medicines intentionally, not to use it to numb and distract, but to use it to accomplish a goal or to solve a problem or to build community or whatever it is, right? And so that fine line between escape and engagement with our feelings is really what determines whether or not somebody, in large part, whether or not somebody has a addiction tolerance type reaction to these tools versus a engagement and healing experience as a result.
This is kind of a curveball, but I know someone who kind of is addicted to ketamine, kind of as a
It does happen.
Lots of trauma. This is for many, many years before ketamine was,
used commonly.
And like, so for someone that has severe trauma, drug addiction her whole life, now, drug of choice is ketamine, OD'd multiple times, but she's, for whatever the reason, like ketamine is, tolerated. How would you pull her out of that addiction? Like, what's her path?
That's a good question. That's a tough one. I do work with a lot of these folks, and, I think the first place we start is sobriety. Right? Let's get you back to feeling comfortable being in your normal, sober state without anything else from the outside altering you. And that's where tools like Apollo and supplements, like the right kinds of supplements, optimize our body's functioning, that don't give you a high, but they do help reduce stress and inflammation in the body. Really good quality CBD and some non-psychoactive cannabinoid products. Things like adaptogenic mushrooms and tools that boost functioning of the vagus nerve system, the parasympathetic recovery system, are all really helpful to people to help them learn to be present with themselves without a drug on board. And so that's where it all has to start, which is showing people that they can do it and teaching them how to show themselves, I can exist without altering myself from the outside. And then we teach them techniques that alter themselves from the inside, right? So like the breathing techniques, the self-touch, self-hugs, completely underrated, consensual touch and hugs from another person. There's a lot of great self-touch techniques, actually, even things like rubbing the inside of the outside of the ear. There's a vagus nerve pathway there that helps to calm the body relatively quickly. And so we teach people all this stuff, and then they learn how to self-soothe. Right? Going back to the stuff we were supposed to learn as kids, and meditation and mindfulness ultimately become part of that, because when we're constantly overstimulated in modern society, too much input, too loud, causes stress. And our bodies respond to that not well, right? We respond to it like, oh my God, I'm totally overwhelmed right now. I don't even know where to start to deal with my problems. And so teaching people the techniques of learning to filter out the noise in whatever way you do it ultimately culminates in learning mindfulness and meditation, because that is the technique that trains your attention to be under your control again. And breath is really where it starts. Breath is the thing we always have control over, pretty much no matter where we are at any given time. And so if you can remind people and teach people how to breathe properly, even just to take one breath, right? Just one conscious inhale and exhale that they were in control of and that they decided to do, that in and of itself can start to shift you into a state of more calm parasympathetic recovery. And that's really empowering for people, because addiction is really a disorder of just not feeling in control of your life. So how do you try to feel in control? You put something in your body that you know to some extent is going to make you feel a certain way. That gives you a feeling of control. So now it's just restoring that back to the individual. And that's kind of where we start. And we don't work with medicine, usually with people who are habitually using psychedelics or other medicine. We try to avoid medicine and use technology and use non-psychoactive, non-high-inducing supplements and more mild stuff. And then gradually, when they've had a long period of sobriety and they've done well, we can start to consider introducing a meaningful experience with something like ketamine again. But it takes time.
Thank you for listening to the Heal Podcast. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. And make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. And please rate and review us so that we can grow and reach more people. Thanks so much, and be well.